OKC Thunder season ticket holder, touching the wood at all these games. Father, author, entrepreneur, a personal friend of mine, been in the industry since 2004, right? And what's so dope about Vance, what's so dope about you is that you don't just do credit repair, you niched it down to suing debt collectors, suing and winning against debt collectors. So, can you talk about that for me?
Oh yeah. So, well, everything that I teach people, I've personally been through it, right? So, say for an example, as you guys can see the camera, you see this scar right here, right? So, um, I wasn't just always following the rules, going down the road. So, what I was doing was I was going to work, and I was working on drilling rigs. I was probably driving like 4 or 5 hours away from my house in Oklahoma City, staying with my parents, right? So I was driving down the road. I had some Long John Silvers, so I'm eating like some fish, and I'm driving with one leg on the steering wheel, and I was talking on the speakerphone, right? And so I got into a wreck. Um, the bystanders or people that was looking, they called the ambulance. So I went out the front windshield, and then they called the ambulance. Went to the hospital, checked me out, and stuff like that. So I didn't pay the bill, and then next thing you know, here comes the phone calls, here comes um, the letters and stuff like that. So what I did was I got a recorder, and I just started recording the calls, right? So I'm thinking I'm doing everything I was supposed to do under the sun. So what I did was recorded the calls. They kept calling, and then I went to small claims, and then the judge was just because they didn't say the mini Miranda, so that's a requirement under the FDCPA when they contact you, like this is an attempt to collect the debt, things of that nature. And so they didn't say it, or they didn't say it at all, really. And so I took them to small claims, like, oh, okay, yeah, this. I was under the assumption that all judges knew the law, and that's not true. So what had happened was we went to court, and the judge asked me, is this a criminal case or is this a civil case? And I'm like, oh my God. So she dismissed the case. So when she dismissed the case, the debt collector went downstairs, and then they sued me. So, I'm kind of bummed down because I lost the case. And then um my dad calls me saying, hey, you know, you got some papers here. It's like some guys just dropped some papers here. So I'm like, what is it? So go to the house, look at the documents. They're suing me now. So now I got to go back to the drawing board. And so what happened was I drew up a motion to dismiss because in the state of Oklahoma, a debt collector can't sue in small claims. And then so I draw my motion to dismiss, file it with the courts, and so the judge just automatically, when we came to court that day, she just looked at the guy and said, "This case dismissed." So now, I got my chest out a little bit, and so look, I'm like, dude, now you didn't say to mini Miranda, and then you did something that you could not legally do, and now I'm just going to take you to federal court. So in this whole ordeal, it's a legal clause called res judicata, and what that is if a case is tried on its merits, then you can't bring it up again. And so what happened was it was not res judicata because when we went to small claims, the judge was like, "Is this a criminal matter or a civil matter?" So the merits wasn't heard on the case. And so I had to plead out all of that stuff. So I had to do it in, very good detail because we're talking about, judges and what was said and things like that. So um, all in all, I came out victorious. But what was shocking about that experience was the judge leaned back into his seat and was just like, hey, um, you might need to go outside and strike up a deal with this young man because I had the recorder, I had the recorder transcribed, I had all my evidence. I was just ready to go. I was just like, okay, let's do it. And so my first case ended up settling for $3,500.
How did you know to initially do that? Like, how did you know to record it in the first place? So, when debt collectors call us, they have to say you're on a recorded line. But how did you know to do that back? And can we all do that?
Well, yeah. So to answer your question, simple. Yeah, we all can do that. We all can record the call. So let me, as easy as I might explain it, people understanding it, it might be a little bit difficult, right? So I'm in Oklahoma and you're in Florida. So I believe that Florida is a two-party consent state, meaning the both parties on the phone has to know that the phone call is being recorded. And so
Mhm.
in Oklahoma is a one-party consent state, just one party. So let me really explain that. So that one party consent state or two-party consent state, it really goes like it's in protection for the people against the government. So it's like wiretapping laws. So it's against the government, right? So, but this is the thing. Like if you're like going against a debt collector or a debt collector is calling you, don't worry about that. And here's why. Because debt collectors say, hey, this is an attempt to collect the debt. Any information obtained will be used for that purpose. All phone calls might be monitored and recorded. So if somebody is recording you, you can record them. And so I wouldn't, naturally just get too caught up into that. But yeah, so to answer the question, you can record the calls. And so you do not just, if you're going to use it in court, that segment just has to be in that call. Like all phone, like if it's a one party consent state like Oklahoma, it just doesn't have to be in there at all. So if it's a two-party consent state, both parties have to know that it's recorded. So the debt collector usually say, hey, this phone call is monitored and recorded. So it just gives you a right, to use it in court. But if it's a one party or two-party consent state, don't worry about that. You can still record a call, but using it is a different story. But usually if that segment is in there, you don't have nothing to worry about.
Got you. Is recording it something that you would have to do? Because when people think about court, I know for me, I think of court like you want to avoid court. You think about it like jury duty. You're there all day, every day. You're nervous. So can you kind of break down a typical process when it comes to court, when it comes to these debt collectors?
Well, I kind of like run to the court systems. So it's not like you see on TV. It's not like that at all, right? So in federal court, it's not like that. It's more paper, it's more email, it's more phone than
Mm-hmm.
anything. So yeah, so I'm the type of person that's gonna run straight to the courthouse. It's you violate me, we're gonna have some problems, and it's gonna be expensive to get out of it.
Can you give us, let's see, some of the most common violations that you're seeing?
Well, yeah. So you got to understand that there's is multiple common violations. So calling the consumer, right? So a lot of people just run from the phone calls. So the thing is, like, if you're in that predicament, what I would like highly suggest people do is just pick up the phone and get another recording device and start recording the calls, right? So right now I'm doing an interview with you. So and this is the thing, don't lie. Just be honest. Like the more truthful you are, the better off the case is going to be. then just don't be lying, right? So say for example, like we're doing this interview. I will literally pick up the phone and put it on speakerphone, recording the call, and then just be like, "Hey, I'm doing an interview right now. I can't talk." Right? So that's one instance, right? So then you have to have a second instance if you're wanting to make it like more concrete, right? So once again, they're calling back, answer the phone, record a call, and just say, hey, my baby's asleep right now and I can't talk. So now you have a case under the FDCPA. So and that's a good thing that you invited me here to talk, because I want to like clear up a lot of the misconceptions that people have when dealing with debt collectors. Because like the FCRA, which is the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and then you have the FDCPA, which is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which is two it's similar, but it's different regulations. So the FCRA regulates information that's potentially wrong, right? So the FDCPA regulates the actions from the debt collector. So that's the difference between the two body of laws to like simplify it, right? So what's wrong with the information? FCRA, FDCPA is what are they doing, right? So another common violation is, say for example, they're calling the consumer, right? So if the consumer just says, the debt collector says, hey, this is a $500 debt, right? And the consumer says, I thought it was $300, right? So say for an example, if you have something like that on a recording and then they dump it onto your credit report, I want to see that credit report because it might be some gold in that credit report, right? So the gold is the violation. And so we're able to turn that violation into monetary compensation. So the thing about it is what just happened right there was a dispute. And so if they don't mark the information disputed, then that's the violation. Because the debt collector just isn't motivated to helping the consumer in any way, shape, form, or fashion, but just wrenching some money out of their pocket.
Isn't it in the FCRA like the word dispute? It like isn't even defined,
Yeah,
right?
so within the FDCPA, the word dispute is not defined, right? So, and that's the thing that I'm just really glad that you invited me on your show and really asked that question because it's really misunderstood, right? So the thing about it is we are Americans. The foundation of America is to have rights. So, and this is the thing, it's not defined. So you can't tell me what a dispute is, and I can't tell you what a dispute is. And so, with that being said, what happens is if there's a discrepancy in, hey, I disputed, or then of course the debt collector is going to say, no, you didn't dispute, right? And so that becomes what's called a fact question. And so, what a fact question is, it has to go to the jury, right? So, say for an example, if the action is filed, so if the case is filed, and so you go through the steps, the legal steps, right, of moving your case along. That means what's what's typically going to happen is the debt collectors are going to try to dismiss the case, right? They always try that. It's super normal. It's like drinking water to a debt collector. They're going to try to dismiss the case. So you just point out to the judge, like, no, this can't happen. And this can't happen because of it's a fact question. It's a material fact question. So they're going to try to get a summary judgment motion, basically try to legally say, hey, it's no facts here. This is garbage. And they're going to try to dismiss it or try to get their summary judgment motion granted. The judge cannot legally grant the summary judgment motion. It has to be heard by a jury. And so that's super powerful because, say, for an example, we're talking about a $200 debt. We're talking about $1,000 debt, right? So this $1,000 debt, this $200 debt that they bought for pennies on a dollar, are you willing to spend $100,000 to say this person did not dispute, or this person did dispute it, or we want to just collect the debt? It's just not. It's just not worth it in business sense, right? So, but going through all of them hoops for the consumer is beneficial for the consumer because typically when I'm involved in these cases, you have the debt is deleted permanently, so it's not coming back. And then you have the debt waiver. So this means that the debt is totally wiped away legally. Can't come back, not going to be reported again, all of that above. So like it attempts to make the consumer whole, and the debt collector, tries to escape the liability from the lawsuit, but it won't happen if I'm involved in the lawsuit.
So that's basically the motivation to tell consumers to do things like this. Not only did you just say, not only is it going to get rid of the debt, the financial obligation completely. So for example, if you have all these medical bills on here or whatever, it's going to get rid of that financial obligation completely from the consumer, and it's deleted off the credit report. So like that's the motivation to do these things. So how easy is it basically for someone like me to just walk into the courthouse and file this after, say, I recorded them on the phone, I got the recording, then what do I do with it? What do I do with that? I used 2 cell phones, I got the recording, and then what do I do? So what would you say I do with this?
Well, great question.
Like, am
So,
I going to get some money?
yeah, well, okay, so I'm gonna cover all bases, right? So, say for example, let's talk about the money part. So, in the United States right now, as we talk, it's $405 to sue in federal court, no matter what type of case it is. And then you have to serve the party. So you got to give the lawsuit to the debt collector. So that typically can be like $50 to, 150 bucks, right? So depending on the company, where it's at, and all that type of stuff. So let's just give or take and say $500 is on the table. So let's go back to another scenarios. Let's say, for an example, the consumer just has no money, right? So we can go to the courts and say, hey, look, this is this consumer's financial snapshot, right? This is what this person looks like, right? Can we waive all of this? And some of the times the courts say yes. So that's what it looks like on that aspect, right? So, but before they grant you and say, hey, you can proceed without money or you can't, they look at the complaint. They see if the complaint is thorough enough to even grant that type of stuff. And so if you're like self-help, a lot of the times it's a big, super steep hurdle because you have legal pleading standards. And so um, just trying to figure this out like on your own, like the first time, a lot of people they can't get over that hurdle. And um, so yeah, I will reach out to someone who has the experience, and get a little guidance before you start doing that. Because a lot of people come to me and, they didn't copy something online and then they get hit with like a motion to dismiss. And then it just turns out not to be good for them. And it's just like, bro, I wish you would have came like before you did this. And it's just like, hey, I'm copying this, or hey, I got this. And I'm like, man, it's just not good. So Because you got to understand that the laws are changing. Well, not the law specifically, the statutes is changing. The cases around the statute is changing. So you got to have someone who knows how to do that type of research specifically, um, because I've been told several times and that companies and courts and judges just don't like this body of law because it helps you know that needy person, you know and so it just doesn't help the rich. And so, you know